She starved so her sons could eat, then they returned and broke her heart the day my sons came back. They didn't bring hugs, they brought paperwork, a recorder, and a key that had been hiding in my pocket for 20 years, waiting for the moment everything I'd done to survive finally came due. The knock wasn't gentle, it wasn't polite. It was the kind of knock that didn't ask, it told. She froze with a dish towel in her hands. The kitchen was small, too small. The air smelled like hot water, cheap soap, and something old that never really left. Not dinner, not comfort, just getting by. Her stomach tightened like it always did. She didn't have enough in the cabinets to make a real meal, but her boys ate. That had always been the rule. Her hunger didn't matter, as long as theirs did. Another knock, harder this time, like whoever it was had already decided she was guilty of something. Her heart kicked up into her throat. She moved toward the door like her legs had forgotten how to be legs, hand on the knob, one breath. Then she opened it. 4 men stood on her porch, big, solid, blocking the light, and for half a second her brain couldn't make sense of what her eyes were seeing because she knew those faces, not like strangers, like memories. Like scraped knees, missing teeth, baby cheeks and cheap Halloween costumes, but those boys were gone. These were men, jawlines, stubble, hard eyes that didn't soften when they saw her, and the one in front, the oldest, he didn't smile. He looked past her into the house like he was counting what she owned, like he was searching for proof. "Ma," he said, one word, and it hit her dead center. Her mouth opened, nothing came out. She wanted to say their names. Wanted to grab them, pull them in, hold on like she'd been holding her breath for 20 years, but the oldest stepped forward and lifted a folder. Brown, thick, official. He shoved it toward her like it was a police report. "We need to talk," he said, "right now." Her voice barely worked. I thought, you thought what?" The man behind him snapped. His tone was sharp, impatient, like she'd already wasted too much of their time. "That you could keep it buried forever?" Buried. The room swayed a little, her fingers shook as she took the folder. She didn't open it, not yet, because she already knew the feeling. This wasn't love, this wasn't a miracle. This was a bill coming due. "Come in," she whispered, stepping back. They walked past her like she wasn't even there. Heavy boots on thin carpet, like the house belonged to them, like she was the one trespassing. The oldest stopped in the middle of the living room. Old couch. Faded blanket, the same walls that had watched her cry quietly so the boys wouldn't hear. A framed photo hung crooked near the window, 4 little boys lined up, all teeth and joy. He stared at it, long enough to make her chest hurt. Then he looked at her. "You remember what you told us?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "I told you a lot. I mean about Dad," he said. The temperature in the room dropped. Her hands clenched the folder tighter. "I told you," she began. But the words stuck because the memory stuck. A man who was there and then he wasn't. A name she stopped saying because it was easier for the boys to hate a ghost than miss a person. "Don't," one of the others cut in. "Don't start crying like that's gonna fix it." That one stung because she wasn't trying to act. She wasn't trying to manipulate anybody, but her body didn't care what she wanted. Her body remembered. The oldest tossed something onto the coffee table, a key, cheap metal, neon tag. Her eyes locked on it, her stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Oh no," she breathed before she could stop herself. The oldest heard it. His jaw tightened. "So you do know," he said quietly. "You know exactly what that is." Her throat burned because she remembered that key. She remembered hiding it just for a week, just until rent, just until she could breathe again. But weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and some things you don't handle later. You just carry them until they break you. One of the sons, tall, restless, started pacing. His hands kept opening and closing like he couldn't find somewhere to put the anger. "Do you have any idea," he said, voice cracking, "what it feels like to grow up thinking you weren't enough?" Her eyes filled instantly. "Baby, don't call me that," he snapped fast, like the word itself cut him. Silence hit the room, not peaceful, not quiet, the kind that makes the air feel heavy. She looked at all 4 of them. Trying to find the boys inside the men, trying to find her kids, but all she saw was pain held tight behind their eyes like a weapon. "Why are you here?" she asked, softer now, careful. The oldest didn't blink. "We're here because we found it." Her blood turned cold. Not we missed you, not we came home, found it. He nodded at the folder in her hands. You're gonna open that, he said. And you're gonna tell us the truth. Her fingers felt stiff, like they didn't belong to her. She opened the folder like it might bite. Papers, copies, dates that punched her in the gut. She didn't need to read every line. One word screamed off the page, adoption. Her vision blurred. No, she whispered. It wasn't denial, it was grief, raw and immediate. One of the sons leaned forward, eyes blazing. So it's true, he said. You signed us away. I didn't, her voice cracked. I didn't want to, but you did, the oldest said, calm as ice. And you never told us. Tears spilled before she could stop them. I tried to keep you. I swear I tried. The pacing son whirled on her. Then why does it say you agreed? She couldn't answer fast enough because the truth wasn't clean. The truth didn't fit on one line. The truth was overdue rent, eviction notices, a fridge that stayed empty, and a mother staring at 4 little faces and realizing love wasn't enough to feed them. Sometimes love doesn't look like love. Sometimes it looks like a signature you can barely hold the pen for. She swallowed. Her voice came out small. I was starving, she said, so you could eat. For one breath it almost landed, almost. But the oldest son's face hardened like stone. He stepped closer, close enough for her to see the scar in his eyebrow, close enough for her to smell his cologne, expensive, new, and he said it like a verdict. Stop, he said. Stop trying to sound like a saint. He snatched the folder and flipped to a page, jabbing it with his finger. Because we didn't just find adoption papers, he said. We found the money. Her mouth went dry. What money? His eyes didn't move. Dad's money, he said, and the way he said it like it tasted bad, like it was theft, like it was betrayal. Her heart slammed against her ribs. I don't know what you, please, the youngest finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, that was worse. It shook like he was holding himself together by one thread. Please don't lie again, she stared at him. Same eyes he used to have in the backseat, sleepy, trusting. And in that moment she understood the truth. They didn't come back to be held. They came back for answers, for receipts, for blood. The oldest lifted the key between 2 fingers. This storage unit, he said, has your name on it. He leaned in. And inside, he whispered, is everything you never told us. Her lungs forgot what to do. Her hands curled into fists. Her throat burned. And before she could speak, the oldest reached into his jacket and pulled out a small audio recorder. He set it on the table like it was a weapon, pressed play. Static. Then a man's voice, faint, crackling, a voice she hadn't heard in 20 years, a voice that made her blood turn to ice. If anything happens to me, the voice said, don't let her touch a dime. Her knees nearly gave out. The oldest son stared at her like she was a stranger standing in his mother's skin. Now tell us, he said, who are you really, Ma? If you're still with me, hit like, it tells the algorithm this story matters. And subscribe, because what's in that storage unit, it changes everything. The recorder kept playing, that voice from the past kept talking, and she realized the men in her living room weren't just her sons, they were the consequence. And whatever was hidden in that unit was finally coming home. 20 years earlier, hunger had a sound. It wasn't just a stomach growling, it was the soft click of an empty fridge, the scrape of a spoon against a pot that had already given up. The way a little boy would sniffle, quiet, so his brothers wouldn't start crying too. That's what people don't get about poverty. It doesn't just take money, it takes your choices, it takes your pride, it takes your sleep. She started lying in tiny ways, the kind of lies that sound harmless until you say them every day. Dinner's almost ready. I already ate. I'm not even hungry. After a while, the words didn't feel like lies. They felt like prayers. Some nights she boiled noodles with just salt, no butter, no sauce. She'd smile like it was a treat and say, special tonight. The boys would slurp it down like it was a holiday. And she'd sip hot water, pretending her stomach could be fooled. When the boys were little, she'd sit on the floor and count coins like it was sacred work. Pennies, nickels, dimes, she'd whisper the numbers under her breath. Rent, lights, water. Food was whatever was left, but her boys couldn't be whatever's left. So she made herself last. Then one afternoon, the oldest came home with a folded paper from school, not a drawing, not a good report, a note. Your children appear underfed, it said, underfed, like they were animals, like she was failing a basic human test. She went into the bathroom and cried with her hand over her mouth, silent, because moms don't get to fall apart where kids can see it. Then she rinsed her face, practiced a smile in the mirror, and walked out like everything was normal. That night she took the last $20 she had and bought groceries: bread, peanut butter, eggs. At the checkout her hands shook because she knew what she was trading: food now for rent later, and rent didn't forgive. 2 weeks after that, her landlord banged on the door like he owned the air inside the apartment. "Pay up or pack up," he yelled. The boys froze behind her, shoulder to shoulder, wide-eyed. She cracked the door just enough to speak. "Please," she said, "just until Friday." His eyes flicked to the kids. Then back to her, annoyed, almost bored. "Friday," he said, "or you're out." When he finally left, she locked the door and slid down it, her back against the wood. Her boys stared at her like they were waiting for permission to be scared. So she gave them a laugh instead. "It's okay," she said. "We're okay." But she wasn't okay. That night, after the boys fell asleep, she reached under the bed and pulled out a shoebox. Inside wasn't cash, it wasn't photos. It was a letter on crisp paper with a fancy logo, something that didn't belong in her life. It had come months ago. She'd read it once, then hid it like it could burn her, because it wasn't just mail, it was leverage. The letter said their father had died. The letter said there was money, not buy a mansion money, but for her, it was groceries and rent, heat in the winter, a chance to breathe, a chance to stop crying in bathrooms. But then she read the next part. The conditions, the rules, the cold language that made her stomach turn. The money was for the children, not her, and an appointed trustee somebody approved would decide if she was fit to manage anything, fit, like she was paperwork. Like her love didn't count. She folded the letter back into the shoebox and told herself she'd deal with it when life calmed down. Life never calmed down. 2 days later, one of the boys got sick, a fever that wouldn't break, shaking, sweating. She didn't have money for urgent care. She wrapped him in blankets and held him all night, whispering into his hair, "Please, please." By morning he was better, but she wasn't, because she finally understood something she'd been avoiding. She could lose them, not just to hunger but to the system, to forms and concerns, to strangers who talked about best interests from clean offices with full stomachs. A week later, a woman came to the door. She said she was with Family Services. Neat hair, calm voice, clipboard held like a shield. "We just want to check in," the woman said, and before she could say yes or no, the woman stepped inside, professional, practiced. The boys lined up without being told, like they'd learned early how to look good. The woman's eyes moved across the apartment. Bare shelves, thin walls, a couch that had seen better decades, one cracked action figure on the floor. The pen scratched the paper. "Do you have family support?" she asked. "No." "Do you have consistent income?" She hesitated, and she hated herself for that hesitation. "I do what I can," she whispered. The woman nodded like she'd heard that sentence 1,000 times, and that's what terrified her, because it meant she wasn't a person, she was a pattern. That night she opened the shoebox again, read the letter again, and this time she didn't skim. She stared at the name at the bottom, a law firm, a trust, a man she'd never met who suddenly had power over her children, and then it clicked. The boy's father came from money, old money, the kind that didn't forgive. The kind that didn't want a poor woman attached to their name. This wasn't help, it was control. They didn't want her to have the money, they wanted the boys, they wanted to raise them right away from her. She stared at the ceiling until morning. Then, on Friday, rent day, she walked into the lawyer's office. The chair was too soft, the room smelled like polished wood and expensive decisions. A man in a suit slid papers across the desk like he was sliding her fate. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We can ensure your sons are provided for," he said. "And me?" she asked, small voice, barely there, he didn't even pretend. "You'll receive transitional assistance," he said, "housing accommodations. Support, Accommodations, like she was a problem to store somewhere. She looked down at the papers, and there it was, a line that said she would surrender her rights. Temporary, they said, until you get on your feet, they said. They said it the way people say, this is for your own good. Her hand shook so hard the pen almost slipped. She thought about the empty fridge, the school note, the fever, the clipboard, the landlord's fist pounding her door, and then she signed. The second the ink dried, she felt it, like she'd stepped off a cliff and the ground didn't come back. She went home and the boys ran to her like she was safety. "Did you get groceries?" one asked. She smiled through a throat full of broken glass. "Yeah," she lied. That night she made eggs, watched them chew like it was the best meal on earth. She didn't take a bite. She couldn't. 2 days later, cars pulled up, not police cars, sedans. Quiet doors, quiet shoes, people who didn't rush because they didn't have to. A woman with perfect nails held a folder. A man stood beside her with a calm, clipped voice. "We have an order," he said. The oldest boy grabbed her shirt with both hands. "Ma," he whispered, "what's happening?" She tried to answer. No sound came because the system doesn't wait for mothers to find words. They took the boys, all four, one by one, crying, reaching for her, and she chased them barefoot into the street, screaming their names like the sound could anchor them to her. The door on the last car shut, and then the street went quiet, too quiet. She stood there shaking until she saw something on the curb, metal catching light. A key, a storage unit key with a neon tag. Somebody must have dropped it during the handoff, careless, like none of this mattered. She picked it up with trembling fingers. She didn't even know why she kept it. Maybe because it felt like proof, maybe because it felt like a weapon, maybe because it was the only thing left she could hold. She stumbled back inside, opened the shoebox, pulled out the letter again, and that's when she saw the line she'd missed at the bottom, small print, cold as winter. "Do not disclose the trust, do not contact the children. Any attempt to interfere will result in immediate termination of benefits and permanent loss of contact." Termination, not just money, her children. She dropped the paper and fell to her knees, and the hunger that night wasn't in her stomach. It was in her chest. It was the space where her boys used to be. She clutched that storage key like it could keep her alive. Then the phone rang. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting for it. A man's voice said, calm and certain, "Don't fight this." A beat, then quieter, "Because if you do, you'll never see them again." Time doesn't heal everything. Sometimes it just turns the volume down. The pain doesn't leave. It just waits quiet until you stop paying attention. After the boys were taken, she moved into a one-bedroom, not because she wanted to. Because there was no reason to keep extra space for people who weren't coming back. She worked whatever would hire her, diner shifts, laundry, cleaning offices at night when the buildings were empty and nobody looked her in the eye. And even after it was just her, she kept living like she still had 4 mouths to feed, not out of habit, out of punishment. Every time she saved a little money, she'd see something in a store window and her body would react before her brain could stop it. A hoodie on clearance, a cheap basketball, a toy car. She'd pick it up, hold it, then her face would change like she remembered all at once, and she'd put it back. Slowly, like it hurt to let go. The system sent her one letter, just one. It said the boys were placed. It said they were stable. It told her to focus on improving her circumstances. It didn't say where they were. It didn't say if they woke up crying the first week. It didn't say if they asked for her. So she stopped doing things that made time feel real. No photos, no birthdays, no holidays, but once a year she'd bake a tiny cupcake anyway. 4 candles, 4 small flames. She'd blow them out alone at her kitchen table and whisper, "I'm sorry." And the storage key, she kept it on her. Every day, in her pocket like a worry stone, like a piece of metal could keep her from breaking. She never went to the unit. She was scared of what it might prove. Scared it would confirm the thing she couldn't survive admitting, that she'd been tricked, or worse, that she'd signed them away for nothing. Years passed, then more. Gray started at her temples. Her hands got rough. Her back started hurting in ways sleep didn't fix. One day at a bus stop, she saw a young man laugh, head thrown back, shoulders wide, and something inside her snapped. For half a second she knew. Her heart jumped like it recognized him before her eyes did. She followed him half a block fast, desperate, until he turned and she realized he was a stranger. She leaned against a pole and cried anyway. Because grief will embarrass you, it doesn't care who's watching. Then one winter she got sick, not a cold sick, bad sick, a cough that scraped her chest raw, breathing that felt like dragging air through a straw. She couldn't afford a doctor, so she did what she always did. She went to work, until her neighbor found her on the floor. Bright ambulance lights, cold straps, a nurse leaning close, talking loud like volume could fix loneliness. "Do you have family?" the nurse asked. She almost laughed. Almost. "No," she said, and for the first time she didn't say it like a sentence, she said it like a fact. 3 days later she came home and found a letter wedged in her door. No stamp, no return address, just her name, handwritten. Her knees weakened, her fingers shook opening it. Inside was one sentence: "We know where you are." No signature, no mercy, just a reminder. She sat at the kitchen table for hours staring at those words. Then she pulled out the shoebox. The copied papers, the trust letter, the key, and for the first time in years she said it out loud. "They lied to me," but the thought that followed was worse. What if they didn't? What if the boys grew up safe, warm, fed? What if her pain had been the price of their peace? That's what she told herself on the nights she couldn't breathe through the guilt. Then late summer, hot air, bright sun, she heard it. That knock, hard, heavy, the kind of knock that doesn't bring good news. She opened the door and 4 men stood there, her sons, grown, real, breathing. For half a second, hope tried to rise in her chest like it didn't know better. Then she saw their faces. No warmth, no softness, just something tight behind the eyes, something carried a long time. The oldest held adoption papers like a weapon. The youngest looked like he might cry, but his jaw was locked like he'd promised himself he wouldn't. The second son stared past her like he was trying to find the version of her he remembered, and coming up empty. And the third kept glancing around the house. At the walls, at the couch, at the framed photo, like he was estimating what everything was worth. Then the recorder, static, and their father's voice, ice from the past. "If anything happens to me, don't let her touch a dime." She tried to speak, tried to tell them about hunger, about eviction threats, about the social worker's clipboard, about the papers with clean language that stole dirty lives. But she could already see it in their shoulders. They weren't here to listen, they were here to convict. The oldest lined in. "We went to the storage unit," he said, "and we found letters." Her stomach twisted. "What letters?" she whispered. He clicked the recorder off like her fear bored him. Then he pulled out a stack of envelopes. Old, yellowed, unsent, her handwriting. Her throat closed so tight it hurt, because she remembered. She wrote to them for years, every birthday. Every holiday, every night she couldn't sleep, but she never mailed them because the trust letter warned her, because they said she'd lose them forever if she tried. So she stored her love in that unit like a secret, like a sickness, like proof she still existed. And now her sons held her words like evidence. The oldest slid one envelope across the table. It stopped in front of her. Her handwriting stared up at her like a confession. "To my boys, if you ever come back, please let me explain." Her lips trembled, she reached for it, and the oldest slammed his hand down, stopping her. "No," he said, "you don't get to touch that." She flinched like he'd hit her. The youngest whispered, barely audible, "I read them," he said. His voice cracked once, just once, and it messed me up. Her eyes snapped to him. "Messed you up how?" she asked, desperate, but the oldest cut in immediately. "It doesn't matter," he said. "We're done with stories." He pointed at the adoption papers again. "We're here for answers," he said, "and we're here for what's ours." The oldest reached into his folder and pulled out one last document, not adoption, not the trust. A court paper, stamped, official. He set it on the table and tapped it with one finger. She read the words and her vision blurred. "Writ of possession, Sheriff Lockout scheduled." Her breath caught. Then the oldest said, calm like it was business, "We didn't come back to live here, Ma." He leaned in, eyes flat. "We came back to take this place from you." She stared at the paper like it was written in another language, but she understood it anyway. Pain doesn't need translation. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice sounded small, like she'd shrunk back into that office 20 years ago, gripping a pen with shaking hands. The oldest didn't blink. "Because it's not your house," he said. "It's ours." Her stomach flipped. "I've paid rent here for years." He gave a slow nod, like he was listening to a child explain something obvious. "And the trust covered the rest," he said, "for a long time." The second son stepped forward, quieter than the oldest but heavier. "You've been living off money meant for us," he said. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out, because the truth was a knot. She hadn't used the trust. She didn't even know how to touch it, but she had signed papers back then, and somewhere in the years after, money moved, and the boys clung to the easiest story that she traded them and got rewarded. "Comfort," she whispered, almost laughing through the hurt. She looked around, mold blooming in the bathroom corner, a heater that clicked off when the cold got serious, a couch with springs that bit through the cushion. If this was comfort, then comfort was a joke, but to them, it looked like she got something, and people hate that. They hate thinking their pain made someone else's life easier. The oldest tapped the recorder with 2 fingers. "Dad left instructions," he said. "He left money for us. And he left warnings about you." She flinched at the word dad because she remembered him, sweet talk when it was convenient, gone when it wasn't. "But he had money, and money makes a man sound like truth, even from the grave." "You don't know him," she whispered. The oldest's jaw tightened. "We know enough," he said. "We know you kept us from him." Her eyes widened. "No. He left? Then why did he say you'd steal?" The oldest snapped. She swallowed the scream in her throat, because the answer wasn't complicated, because rich men don't like being the villain in their own story. "Because it's easier to call a poor mother a thief than admit you abandoned your kids." She didn't shout. She just sat down slowly, like her legs forgot how to hold her. The youngest looked away, like he couldn't watch this happen to her and still breathe. The third son, restless, calculating, pulled out his phone. "I already talked to somebody," he said, scrolling. "We can sell this place fast." Sell. That word cracked something deep in her chest, because this wasn't just a roof. This was where she survived, where she waited, where she kept a tiny piece of them alive. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this." The oldest's face didn't soften. "You want mercy?" he said. "Where was your mercy when you signed us away?" Her breath came in sharp, painful pieces. "I did it so you could eat," she said, "so you could live." The second son let out a bitter laugh. "We lived," he said. "But we grew up thinking you didn't want us." The youngest finally spoke. His voice shook like he hated himself for still caring. "I used to dream you were outside my window," he said. "I used to hide food under my bed because I thought you were starving." Her chest tightened so hard it felt like the air left the room, because he was right. She was starving, and she'd been starving without them. She lifted a hand toward him without thinking. He stepped back just one step, not big, not dramatic, but it hit harder than any insult, because that step said, "You're not safe to love." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Tell me what you want," she whispered. The oldest didn't hesitate. "We want the truth," he said, "and we want access to everything in that storage unit." Her throat tightened. "It's just letters." The oldest's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but mean. "No," he said, "it's not." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thick envelope, official, crisp, same logo she'd buried under her bed for years. He tossed it on the table. Her body went cold before her brain caught up. "What is that?" she whispered. The oldest leaned in. "The final trust statement," he said, "and it shows money went missing." Her mouth went dry. "No, I never." "Then explain this," he snapped, flipping it open. Numbers, dates, transfers, account lines, withdrawal entries, wire notations. Her head spun because she didn't understand the layout, but she understood the accusation. The name printed next to the transfers was hers, her signature line, her social, her identity. Someone had used her name like a mask. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. The second son spoke low, almost pleading with himself. "We didn't want to believe it," he said, "but it's right here." The youngest's eyes shined with tears he wouldn't let fall. "Just say you didn't," he whispered. "Please, just say it." She reached across the table, slow, shaking, and placed her palm over the paper like she could stop it from being real. "I didn't do it," she said. And for the first time, the oldest son's face flickered, just a crack, just the smallest hint that doubt got in. Then he hardened again, like doubt was a weakness he hated. "We already talked to the attorney," he said. "The same firm," she breathed. He nodded once, and the room shifted, because suddenly it all lined up: the same suits, the same language, the same cold hands moving people around like pieces. Her pulse hammered. "Who contacted you?" she asked. The oldest didn't answer. He didn't have to. A shadow crossed the doorway. A man stepped inside like he belonged there. Gray hair, perfect suit, calm eyes that didn't feel calm at all. The kind of man who smiles with his mouth and nothing else. He lifted a hand, polite as poison. "Hello," he said smoothly. "It's been a long time." Her blood turned to ice. Not the same face, older now, but the same presence. The same world, the lawyer or someone cut from the same cloth. He glanced at her sons like they were clients, then at her like she was paperwork. "I'm here to wrap this up," he said. "And to correct what should have been handled properly years ago." Her stomach rolled at the way he said properly. He set a new document on the table, a pen beside it. Then he added almost casually, "There's already an open investigation." That sentence made the air in the room feel thinner. "Sign," he said. She looked down. The title hit her like a punch. "Affidavit, admission of fraud." Her fingers went numb. The oldest's voice lowered. "If you sign," he said, "this ends." "Ends," she whispered, like her whole life was something you closed out at a desk. She looked at her sons, 4 men. And underneath all that anger, 4 boys still trapped in the moment they were taken. And she understood something sharp and clear: if she signed, they'd hate her forever, and that hate would follow them everywhere. She pushed the pen away. "No," she said. The lawyer's smile faded just slightly. "Be careful," he said. She lifted her chin, tears still on her face. "I already lost everything once," she said. "You can't scare me with threats." The lawyer leaned in. "Oh," he said softly. "It's not a threat." He nodded toward the window. Outside, a car idled at the curb. 2 figures stepped out, not random cops, a detective in a uniform, purposeful, like they were already late. The youngest's face drained of color. "No," he whispered, panicked. "This wasn't supposed to be." The oldest swallowed hard. For the first time, he looked young. The officer stepped in and spoke calmly, like reading a script. "Ma'am," he said, "we have a warrant for your arrest." Her stomach dropped straight through the floor. The cuffs clicked. Cold metal, final sound. Behind her, the oldest son's voice cracked, real this time. "Wait," he said. "Hold up." The lawyer's smile returned. Because he'd done it. He'd turned her sons into the people who delivered her. As they led her toward the door, she looked back at her boys, and the youngest looked like he might break. The oldest looked like he'd been punched in the soul. And the lawyer, still smiling, said softly to the room, "Now we can finally move forward." The cold cuffs bit into her wrists. She didn't fight, not because she agreed, because she was tired, tired in the bones. But as they guided her toward the door, she turned her head, looked back at her sons, and saw it all at once: shock, guilt, fear. The oldest stood there like someone had punched straight through his chest. The youngest was crying now, no pride left to hide behind. She spoke through the ache in her throat. "Don't let him do this to y'all," she whispered. The lawyer didn't even look at her. He waved a hand like she was a problem being removed. "Take her," he said, and that's when the second son moved. Fast. He stepped in front of the officers, hands up, not touching anyone, but planted. "Wait," he said, voice shaking but loud. "Wait, just wait." The officer's tone hardened. "Sir, step back." The second son didn't. He pointed at the lawyer. "You told us she stole it," he said. "You told us it was her." The lawyer's smile was thin. "And it is." The second son picked up the trust statement again. His eyes didn't skim it like before. They tracked it line by line. Then he flipped to a page and said, slower now, "These transfers happened when she wasn't even conscious." The room tightened. The oldest snapped, "What are you talking about?" The second son pulled out his phone with a shaky hand, thumb flying. "I took a picture of her hospital paperwork," he said, not looking up, "because I didn't trust anything in that folder." He held the screen up, a discharge date, a bed number, a winter year stamped in black ink. Then he tapped the statement again. "These withdrawals," he said, "same dates." Silence hit like a drop. The youngest whispered, stunned, "So she couldn't have done it." The lawyer's voice sharpened. "This is irrelevant," he snapped. "There is an active warrant and the signature," the second son cut in. He grabbed one of her old envelopes. Her handwriting held it next to the trust statement page. "She writes like this," he said, tapping the curve of the letters. "See the loop?" Then he tapped the trust signature. "This one is stiff," he said. "It's traced." The oldest grabbed the papers, staring like they were changing shape in his hands. His face went tight. His breathing got loud. Then he lifted his eyes right to the lawyer. "You told us she was a thief," he said. His voice wasn't ice anymore. It was confused, angry, cracked. "You told us she abandoned us." He looked at his mom in handcuffs. And the word came out like a wound. "Ma," he swallowed hard, "did you ever get money from that trust?" Her throat was burning. "No," she whispered, "not a dime. I never saw it." The lawyer stepped forward, mask slipping. "You ungrateful," he hissed, and caught himself too late. That little hiss was everything. That was the moment the sons finally saw what she'd seen 20 years ago. They weren't here by accident. They were brought here. Used. The oldest turned toward the officers. "Don't take her," he said. The officer hesitated, eyes cutting to the lawyer, then back to the papers. "Ma'am," the officer said carefully, "we're acting on a warrant affidavit. If there's evidence this affidavit is false, that changes things." The lawyer's smile twitched. "Officer, do your job." The second son spoke fast. "He's the one controlling the trust," he said. "He's the one who benefits if she signs that confession." Now the officer's expression shifted, professional, alert. "Ma'am," he said, "we're going to pause transport pending supervisor confirmation." The lawyer's voice rose. "You can't." "I can," the officer cut in, "and I am." The youngest wiped his face with his sleeve, hands shaking. "We have more," he whispered, because he'd been holding one of the old letters the whole time. He opened it with trembling fingers and pulled out a folded copy, an old trust letter. And taped to it a handwritten note from her, not excuses, not begging, just truth. "If I contact you, they said they'll erase me from your life forever." The oldest snatched it, reading so fast his eyes looked like they were drowning. His breath hitched. Then he saw the line at the bottom. "I starved so you could eat. I lived so you could live." His face twisted, not with anger, with pain, the kind you only feel when you realize you've spent years hating the wrong person. The lawyer scoffed, too loud. "This is emotional." "Shut up," the oldest said. 2 words, not screamed. Worse, quiet, final. He stepped toward his mom, looked at the cuffs, then looked at her face. She expected another accusation, expected him to step away again. Instead, his voice broke. "Why didn't you fight harder?" he whispered. Her eyes filled. "I did," she said softly. "I fought until they told me if I kept fighting, I'd never see you again." The oldest swallowed like he was choking on every year he'd lost. And for the first time in 20 years, he believed her. He turned back to the officer. "Check the storage unit," he said. "Everything is in there." The lawyer snapped. "You don't have authorization." The second son held his phone up, recording. "We do now," he said. "Say that again on camera." The lawyer froze for half a beat, and in that half beat, his power shrank. The officer looked at the sons, then back at the lawyer. "Sir," the officer said, "step back while we verify the warrant and contact the DA's office." The lawyer's smile was gone now. The oldest stepped in close to his mom. He took a breath like he was about to do something he didn't know how to do anymore. Then he hugged her, tight. Awkward, like he'd forgotten the shape of it, but real. Her body shook hard, not from fear, from relief so sharp it hurt. The youngest joined, then the second, then even the third, slower, like pride fought him until it lost. 4 grown men clinging to the woman they spent years blaming. The cuffs clinked between them, and she cried, not pretty crying. Ugly, shaking, can't breathe crying, because this was the reunion she used to imagine, just not like this, not with police in the doorway, not with a lawyer watching like a vulture, but it was still them, still her boys. The oldest pulled back, wiped his face like he was mad at tears. He stared at the lawyer. You used us, he said. The lawyer's lips tightened. The oldest's voice dropped lower. You took us from her, he said. And you tried to make us finish the job. The officer stepped in between them. Sir, he told the lawyer, you need to leave now. The lawyer's eyes darted. He saw it clear as day. 4 sons who walked in divided, now standing together. And an officer who wasn't smiling anymore. He backed toward the door. This isn't over, he snapped. The oldest's mouth twitched into something real. Oh, he said, it's just starting. They went to the storage unit that night. All of them in one car, knees pressed together, packed in like they were kids again. When the metal door rolled up, dust rose into the air like ghosts. Inside, boxes, photos, stacks of letters, and one locked trunk. The oldest snapped it open. Inside was a folder, thick, organized, ugly, statements, receipts, account numbers, a paper trail that didn't point at her, it pointed past her. Names, signatures, and at the bottom, the firm, their firm. The youngest whispered, wrecked, they did this. The second son's face went still in the way calm people get when they decide to go to war. They've been doing this, he said, for years. Her son stood there reading her life like evidence. Then the oldest turned to her, eyes wet. Ma, his voice broke. I'm sorry. That apology didn't erase 2 decades, but it stitched something inside her that had been bleeding quietly for 20 years. She touched his cheek like she'd done when he was small. This ain't on you, she whispered. He shook his head. It is, he said, because we came back ready to hurt you. He swallowed hard. And you still loved us, she smiled through tears. Baby, she said, that's what moms do. The oldest looked down at the eviction paper. He tore it clean in half. We're not selling, he said. The third son blinked. We could still, no, the oldest cut in. This is her home. He looked at his mom. Not because of paperwork, he said, because she earned it. The youngest sniffed. And because if we take it from her, he whispered, we become them. Silence. Then the second son nodded once. Tomorrow, he said, we go after the firm. The oldest's jaw tightened. And tonight, he said, turning to his mom, we eat. She laughed, a real laugh for the first time in a long time. Y'all still hungry? She teased, voice shaking. The youngest smiled through tears. Ma, he said, I've been hungry my whole life. If this hit you in the chest, call your mom or call the person who raised you. Don't wait 20 years. And if you want more stories like this, comment. I'm calling today.